I'm so bored.
I know what we can do.
What?
Mathematics!
Me gustan los matemáticas.
So today we're going to learn about the chain rule. The formula for the chain rule is actually very simple. So if you have the formula of h of x equals fg of x, all you're taking is the derivative of h of x, also known as the outside-inside rule. So we have an example equation of f of x equals x plus 8 over the square root of x squared plus 1 cubed. Not only does this equation apply to the chain rule, but it also applies to the power and quotient rule. So with the chain rule in mind, we're first going to solve the outside part of this equation by using the power rule nx n minus 1. Now that we know the power rule, we're going to go ahead and solve the outside part of the equation. So we have the equation cubed. In that case, we're going to plug in the formula right here, and n is 3. So it'll be 3x 3 minus 1. Due to the power rule, this ultimately makes our formula now f of x 3 to x plus 8 over the square root of x squared plus 1. And 3 minus 1 is 2, so this will be squared. So now we're going to solve the inside part of the equation. But before we do that, we're going to get rid of the square root. And by doing so, you will end up with x plus 8 over x squared plus 1 to the 1/2 squared. And the reason for that is because when we're using the quotient rule and we're taking the derivative of g, it's going to be a lot easier having it to the 1/2 than having the square root. With the quotient rule in mind, we're now going to find what f of x is, g of x, the derivative of g of x, and the derivative of f of x. So if we were to take the derivative of this entire equation, the 3 would actually be taken out. So now we're just left with x plus 8 to the x squared plus 1 to the 1/2 squared. So with that in mind, we're going to find f of x first. So it's actually going to be equal to x plus 8 to the 1/2. And if we were to take the derivative of f of x, this x would be 1, and this 8 would be 0, ultimately leaving 1 plus 0, which is just 1. Now we're going to find g of x, which is just x squared plus 1 to the 1/2. If we were to find the derivative of g of x, it's going to equal x squared plus 1, but to the negative 1/2. And we're actually going to pull out a 2x as well. And the reason for that, with the power rule in mind, this 1 is actually a 0, and this x squared is 2x 2 minus 1, also known as 2x. Now that we found what f of x, g of x, the derivative of f of x, and the derivative of g of x is, we can plug it back into the equation, also known as the inside part of the chain rule. So we're going to add the derivative of f, which was 1, multiplied by just g of x, which is x squared plus 1 to the 1/2, all subtracted by regular fx to the 1/2, multiplied by x squared, which is the derivative of g, plus 1 to the negative 1/2, multiplied by 2x. And the bottom is g of x squared, which is x squared plus 1 squared. Now that we solved the equation, we can simplify. So we're going to start off by finding any common factors that we can cross out. For example, this 1/2 to the 2x can cancel each other out. Now that we factored out the 2 and the 1/2, we're now left with a new simplified formula. And now we're going to convert the entire equation together by multiplying this part of the equation with this. And then we're going to factor. By factoring, we're actually going to end up bringing this part of the formula down, making this a positive 1/2. And we're going to factor out this x squared plus 1. Here is what the new formula will look like after you factored and simplified the formula. Now we're going to add exponents. By adding exponents, we're actually going to be solving just the denominator part of this formula. So, by doing so, since there was 2x squared plus 1, but there was 1 multiplied to the 1/2, this is actually going to end up equaling x squared plus 1 with 5/2. Now we can simplify this formula, or we can keep it the same. To simplify it, we're actually just going to simplify this part by adding in another square root. So the original denominator was x squared plus 1 to the 5/2. With that formula in mind, we're going to actually end up square rooting this entire thing. And that is an ugly square root, so I'm going to redo that. We're actually going to end up square rooting the entire formula. And by doing so, the formula for a fraction is actually b square root x to the a. And our 5 is the a and the 2 is the b. So this is actually going to be square and then x squared plus 1 to the 5th. And that is our formula from the original equation.